Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to another panel discussion on EdTech, Cultivate Customer Experience to Survive. For this session, let me welcome our moderator, Mr. Prasad, MD and RVP, India and SAR, Zendesk, our panelists, Mr. Shantanu, founder and CEO of School Guru, Mr. Byas, co-founder and CEO of Next Education, Mr. Girish, founder and CEO EduBrit Learning, Mr. Arpit, Chief Product Officer, Textbook, Mr. Vinay, Chief Product Officer, Lido Learning. Dear audience, please keep posting your questions in the chat box. A panel may answer your questions in the end. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Prasad.
Thank you, Srishti. I think if the pandemic has been teaching us one way or other, I think early days of my career, one of my first boss, I changed my name. While my name is, Prasad, I'm a South Indian. Of course, I'll have multiple names, but people started calling me Katie by then, about 23 years ago. So thank you for reminding me of my actual name in the corporate world, Srishti. Again, welcome, very warm welcome to all the panelists. And it's no better time than today to talk about the EdTech and some trends that we have seen evolving in the last 6 months. And I think EdTech overall as one of the industry that we've seen considerable growth in all areas that you can possibly can ask for. I think one of the things that I was talking to in the morning in a fireside chat with Divya Gokulnath of Byju's, one of the things that we're talking about is, hey, what brought transformation to every industry? I know EduTech is probably on the tip of the leading the transformation, but rest of the industries, transformation is brought by COVID. So I think as a panel, I will ask all my panel to start addressing a little bit about elephant in the room, which is basically COVID, the impact on their business. At the same time, I'll also request them to introduce a little bit about the business before they start answering. But for the rest of the attendees, guys, please feel free to drop in a question and say which of the panelists that you want the question to be answered, and I will start directing that to that panelist. Now, like I said, in the last 6 months, EdTech has seen a tremendous growth, and the growth has come from multifold. And I know its growth could be different from different industries within sub-industries, sub-focus areas in it. But I would wanted to summarize in two notes. One, it feels like everything has changed. At the same time, if you go dig down and look at nothing fundamentally changed, it is just few things that have evolved. And one of the things that we have seen Zendesk being in the business of serving customers, we went ahead and did a bit of benchmark study, and we figured out that the number of requests on preference of channels of customers is moved from a traditional calling, SMS to probably WhatsApp. Maybe that seems to be the one of the trend that we have seen. And similarly, while the number of customer requests have doubled almost at the end of March and April, it started flattening by June, July, and then looks like there's a good nice healthy growth of 25-30% globally. But if I talk about individual businesses, I'm sure your growth rates will be very different. It is one of such industry which is making a change in the India especially. It's bringing education in one form or other, addressing different needs of every student, if you want to call it as within Indian community. Without further ado, I would want to draw in Vinay from Lido Learning. Vinay, if you could also introduce your company, Lido Learning, what you guys do, but also at the same time, if you can talk about one of the fastest growing sectors, like I said, in pandemic is EdTech. Out of all of this, there could be something that is derived positive. There are many things that have evolved. The question is, would these things that have evolved, would it be permanent for life after pandemic? If there's something to carry forward, what would be carried forward? Or is just a surge that we've seen which will go off after some time? When I will start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Prasad. I'm Vinay. So at Lido, basically, we offer online classes for school kids. So we offer classes for grades 1 to 9, and we're offering math, science, coding, and English as of now. And yeah, to your point, COVID has been a pretty disruptive change in the industry, both good and bad. The good side of it is that users are a lot more receptive to online classes, online education right now, because they don't have another option. They can't go to class schools. The schools are shut down. So a lot of people are more open to try them out. So that really helped with onboarding the students and growing our user base. Um, Now, is that going to stick? That's a good question. So some of it will, some of it will not. Like, I don't think online education, like the schools are not going to completely move online because schools serve a different purpose. They are also doing your child development. They are also doing, there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning that happens in school, which online, at least in the current, with the current technologies, can't solve very well. But what will stick is basically like after school help will definitely move online. People are seeing the benefits of online after school help versus the traditional neighborhood tuitions. The advantage is basically with technology, like there is a lot more personalized, data driven insights you can draw, leverage, and provide help when required for the student and give them uh, and also like content, you can build much more interactive content online, uh, give them a much better experience versus your offline tuition, which is kind of going to be a repetition of what you learn in the school, whereas offline the online classes could actually complement them, give them a very different experience, give them a different interactive, conversational and experiential learning, right? That's what can be differentiated, and that's what is going to stick around. Like post COVID, people will people will definitely like stick around for online classes for these benefits.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vinay. I think it's very common. Looks like this is a very similar parallel that we could draw from e-com industry or a retail industry. While most of those businesses move to digital, but I think post-pandemic, I think you will see a blend of both. I think it's a very similar thought that you also have from edtech industry. Thank you, Vinay. And let me bring in Shantanu. Shantanu, especially one of the topic for today is actually cultivating a great CX. To cultivate a great CX, do you see anything different from pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic? Any fundamental things that you see differently?
So several of them actually. Sad. I mean, look at our business. So we are an online learning solutions company. We work with many universities across the country, and we help them design, develop, and deliver online degree programs, and also help their students make more employment. If you see, India has been a very different type of an organization. I mean, we must be the only country across the world who actually went ahead and banned online learning, online education in this country in 2015. Right? We banned it. So we're a country like that. Uh, the but finally, so that means that when School actually did a survey about 2 weeks back, and we tried to figure out that what percentage of university professors were prepared to handle all of this online learning that we were forced to get into, right? We realized that post our survey, and that report was published about a week and a half back. It said that not more than 10% of the university professors had ever used an online learning tool just before COVID. But India is a different country. Here we don't change for a better option, where we change when we don't have an option. So when the pandemic happened, all of us just jumped into something called online learning, and we had never seen a swimming pool. We just went way to swim inside the ocean suddenly, right? So all of us were trying to do that. In my opinion, pre-COVID, the entire edtech or education technology as an industry had actually disappointed learners to quite some extent. We all knew that education technology and edtech has got holds a lot of promise, it can deliver a lot, but years of PowerPoint presentations and textbooks being repackaged as e-learning actually disappointed a lot of learners. I mean, but the only problem that edtech solved all this while was taking away the class size problem, right? So you could teach many people across classrooms and maybe digitize the distribution of courseware. That's one thing that we do. But post-COVID, I think the entire world of education has started looking at education technology very differently, right? And a lot of these companies that came up, and so many of my peers that I see on the screen, people are doing a fantastic job and figuring out how you can actually customize and personalize education to everybody's needs. Still, the concept of a university student, that way we see it, is not no more at that 18 to 22 years of age type of a student who's fresh out of a class 12 and got into university. The profile of a learner has completely changed. It could be as well as an older person with a lot of work experience, already working somewhere, and is coming to the university or a college or an education company for an upskilling course. So, and the demand of this learner is to replicate his experience in any other consumer experience platform. So they want a platform which is self-servicing, which is where I could take care of my own services. The way I take care on Uber or a Ola or a Amazon or a Swiggy, right? That's the type of experience that I'm looking for from all education service providers. I'm looking at a platform or an education system which is always on the go, which is online, which is on site, which is crowdsourced, which is gamified, which is just in time, right? So I'm looking at a different life form of education. I think that era has come, and where all education service providers will have to focus on keyword that you spelled out, which is consumer experience. And consumer experience is going to drive many business models, and education cannot be left behind. I mean, students are today demanding that type of services from education service providers. And in a world where we are behaving like an open economy, there are so many service providers available, as many number of service seekers that are available. I think only the best one will survive, right? So the one who can give the right type of experience for us. Yes.
Thank you, Shantanu. I think I think your thoughts are very similar to what we've learned from our benchmark report too. I think at the beginning, like I said, it feels like everything has changed, but at the same time, when you peel the onion and look at it, fundamentally things have not changed. If you actually serve your customers and do them the right thing, our consumer, I think the customer will stay loyal to you, and the trust and loyalty will actually live, build into evangelism and bring in more people to do more business with you, or leverage more service from you. I think it looks like that's fundamentally not changed. Thank you, Shantanu, for that insight. Let me draw on base into this conversation. I'm going to ask you a little slightly deeper question there, because one of the things that we have today to discuss as a panel is how do we really cultivate a great CX? And we have seen while the CX is evolving, it's evolving around what the customer wants or a consumer wants. It's not what the business want to provide. It's all looks like it shifted from business to consumer, maybe for the right reasons. And one of the things that we have seen is actually in the recent past, the evolution of WhatsApp, evolution of different channels, or messaging or social messaging channels for customer to have a conversation with businesses like yourself and us, right? Maybe traditional channels like telephone lines and stuff like that, which had difficulty for to survive during the pandemic, they think could not move back to home, while other things would have moved. Wanted to understand from you, do you see what is evolving as a preference of customer communication channels from your lens? And probably before that, if you could introduce your organization a little bit, and then answer this question, that'd be awesome. Bess, you're on mute. Looks like.
As some of you know, we are a B2B tech company trying to provide, learning tools for schools. And, the thing which is happening, right, some of what it will take for people to adopt, right? I think, look, people are facing very basic challenges, right? I mean,
Sorry, Bess, you're in and out on the voice. Is there a way that you could come close to the mic and speak, or maybe have earphones or something of the nature? Sorry, this is probably side effects of having online, webinar. Sorry, is it just me, or Girish? Could you also hear this, or no? No, Bess, we can't. Your audio is not. It's not coming through. While you take a look at it and maybe figure out maybe a place to have a conversation, I'll hold on to this question to you. Maybe I'll move to Girish while you actually figure out this audio issue. Girish, just let me drawing you in. One of the things that I wanted to ask you again from a customer retention perspective, has your customer retention strategies changed because there's a pandemic, or before that was it different? Pandemic times is different. Again, if you could talk from how the retention rates are and as the strategy is being changed.
Thanks so much, Prasad. Just as introduction, my name is Girish Singhania, and I represent an organization called EduBridge Learning. We're in the business of workforce development for the country, wherein we identify youth in the age group of 18 to 30. We provide them relevant training to get employed, and then we followed up with actually sourcing and getting them employed in those recruiting organizations. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've worked with more than 150,000 youth. And we're one of those organizations which, like Shantanu mentioned, we've been forced into going online pretty much since the month of April. So for us, customer retention strategies change drastically. I mean, for that, it's important to also understand who our customer is. Our customer is actually that 18 to 30-year-old Indian unemployed youth looking for that employment opportunity, which has been elusive to him or her, primarily because he or she lacked the skills which were required by the recruiter. Now, that skill could be an actual hard skill, or that could also be a mindset in terms of attitude also. So from that point of view, this audience has always, so what we build in them is softer skills along with some of the harder skills. So traditionally, all of us, in India have obviously been used to the offline or the brick and mortar system of learning. And more so, the audience are our customer. And so we've been doing that for the last 10 years, and our audience is used to that. Now, what the pandemic has done, which I think is the single biggest thing the pandemic has done, is shown everyone, not just people who are running enterprises, but even the learner, something called the possibility. That there is a possibility that whatever I thought cannot happen online can actually happen online. For me, that shift in mindset is, I think, the single biggest gift that the pandemic has probably given, that there is an option or there is a possibility. So when it comes to customer retention, for us, it is extremely critical that everything that we design in our product, in our learning, in our services is done in a manner that it is as close to traditional learning as possible. So use of simulators, uses of games, uses of movies to make it fun, use of clips which the audience, which the customer will relate to make it fun. So the idea is, in EdTech, we always know, I mean, if your program is very long, it leads to lesser retention and all of that, which is why we try to make our programs shorter than they were when they were offline. We try to make our programs more interactive, where they have to enter responses every 5 or 7 or 10 minutes so that they're engaged throughout. So customer retention actually has a lot to do with what my customer wants. And that has changed drastically from pre-COVID to now. And the biggest driver of that is this possibility of online learning, and which is where all of our customer retention, and I mean, the way that we have now become a customer obsessed organization, I would say. Anything that the user wants, we have 3 sets of teams who are always only working on understanding what our customer wants. We, of course, have our trainers, we have a customer experience team, and we have a user experience team. So all of them are constantly working only on that and are making those small tweaks or large tweaks as per whatever we learn from our customers. So this customer obsession has almost become like a culture for us in our organization, which for various reasons was not the case before the pandemic. But this has really made us customer obsessed and focusing on what the customer wants, because we understand that in these 6 months or 9 months or 1 year, if we can show them that possibility and make them believe that what they were doing offline can be done online, then the opportunities are limitless, especially in the space we're in, where we're trying to fuel employment and skills. I think that's something which can truly go a long, long way in developing tomorrow's workforce for India. And that's where our emphasis is on customer retention, Prasad.
Thank you. Thanks, Girish. Just checking this, you back and Basically, it looks like you're talking, but there's some different issue. The voice is just not coming through.
Can you hear me now? No.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Take the question, man. I was just talking about it, right? I just lost that. Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yeah,
Just trying.
sure, no worries. From a CX perspective, what we have seen in the recent past, I think the customer preference or consumer preference of how they want to engage with businesses looks like there is a shift. Traditionally, in the customer experience space, in generally, not just EduTech, but across, customers used to talk over the phone when they have issue or when they want to find information. Or in the digital evolution, customers are known to come onto a app experience, self-service. There is a WhatsApp, there is social messaging. There is a heap of channels that the customer uses to communicate or want to find information from businesses. And what we have seen as Zendesk in the recent past, looks like some of the messaging channels like WhatsApp is seems to be more preferred one across the globe as for customer to talk to businesses. But do you see in your business or in the in the industry, in the edtech industry across in India, do you see the channel shifting from a traditional phones and other things to messaging channels like WhatsApp?
To give you an idea, right? I have a toll-free number, I have an email. People know in terms of the salesperson, person, support group. Get like almost now 90% of my queries on that. I think it's a convenience, right? So I think Indians, WhatsApp is different for them now. Are very, very apt on WhatsApp. So I definitely see that. I never used to believe that. I thought people will like to call up. Maybe I'm old. Probably talk to a representative that our whole live lecture experience and the whole platform experience, WhatsApp has been the problem. That experiment in terms of sending PDFs and people open if you send it as an attachment to an email or as a WhatsApp, right? Scale of difference. I completely agree that I think if today's customer is expecting you to know, and he's expecting the answers also back on that level of speed. But to do that sometimes, like, hope that helps.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I think when you're talking to the screen, I think we can hear it. When you move around, I think it's going up, but we got it. But best, and I got it. I think you're saying that not just you. I think including me. I think some of us are little old school thoughts. I was just talking to Vinay in the beginning that I'm one of those people who still write handwritten notes from a meetings and stuff like that. But some of us still believe that calling is the best thing to get your customers' queries answered and stuff like that. But what I think Shantanu made up the point, looks like the customers aren't using Ubers, Airbnbs. They don't have contact center large scale. They do have some, but the predominant one, the way engage the customers are through channels like chat or maybe email or their app or WhatsApp. So, and I'm glad to see that it's also coming through in EdTech space, and it's predominantly driven by customer, not by the industry. That looks like a very key, shift of driving force for adopting new channels for us. Thank you, Base, for that. Actually, let me draw in Arpit. Arpit, we looked at we looked at channels, we looked at retentions, we looked at a lot of aspects, and I want to bring in your experience and talk about a little bit about how important when you be a product officer, when you think about your products and you design your experience and stuff like that, do you also consider bringing in user community for your customer base? Do you build out user community and design them?
Sure. Just to introduce myself, I'm Arpit. I'm working as a Chief Product Officer for Textbook. As a company, we are in post K-12 segment where we are helping a lot of youth prepare for a lot of government exams. It can be like as big an exam like a railway exam for which 10 million student appear each year whenever railways conduct those exams. So we see sort of huge amount of youth from tier two, tier four city appearing for these exams so that they can actually secure a government job and make a career, a secure career for themselves. And that is where we are trying to help a lot of students. Coming specifically about the community, I think if you compare it with the offline behavior of the students, well, I'm specifically talking about people who are preparing for certain competitive exams, right? So you will always see there will be a group of 4, 5, 6 students preparing together for the exam, even in the offline world, right? I'm talking about probably 2005 era, and that ecosystem is still there, where sort of students are sort of collaborating with each other and trying to help each other to solve their doubts and whatnot. And this is what the opportunity is in the EdTech, the next opportunity, where sort of if you can replicate that behavior on your online product, where you can sort of have a shared resources, where you can solve each other doubts. So as a whole community, I think there's a very big possibility that micro groups, a group of 5, 10 close groups, will work much better. I think we have also seen a huge engagement on our Telegram groups. I think with sort of, I know the WhatsApp is the buzzword, but in post K-12 where the target audience size is bigger, Telegram is also a huge success where you can form a group size of 50,000 users in one single group, helping each other. So that is something that we have seen post pandemic going boom. So definitely huge opportunity for collaboration between students to build communities. I think EdTech is yet to see a stack overflow yet, but I think going forward we will see much more collaboration happening online. People helping each other, solving each other's queries, solving each other's doubt at a community level as well as at the micro group level.
Awesome. Thank you, Arpit. And I also wanted to get Vinay on the similar topic, and your current role and capacity. I'm sure you designed some of these and you drive user community and groups for a better engagement, and also it's a reputation management, right? So if you have a community to answer those questions, the burden on you would come down. But just want to get your thoughts. Sorry. Do you see that when and play user groups and communities is a big role in how you engage your consumers and customers?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it plays a big role, especially like with kids, right? Like our user group is primarily kids, like school-going kids, and at that age, it becomes very important what everybody in their network is doing, and it has a very big network effect. Like once they start sharing whatever they are doing, so. White Hat Junior actually did some great work on this and leveraged the community very well. And yeah, basically like some of the stuff we are doing are like we are building like portfolio pages for our students so that they can showcase like whatever they are working on with everybody. So and kids love to show off their work, like whatever they are building, they love to show that off, and parents love to show that off. So and that brings in a lot of this network effect where seeing somebody do build something and you would want your kids to do the same, so you're more likely to adapt the product and join the service. So we do see a lot of this playing out in the market where there is interest in what peers are doing, what is working for them, and trying to adapt that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vinay. Girish, I want to ask you this from customer experience, and this is probably the word that's been beaten down by industry. In every forum we hear it. It is real, guaranteed. Looks like there is definitely something there. If you provide a great experience, it could actually be good. But is it great customer experience means greater revenue? What's your take?
Definitely. I definitely think greater customer experience will lead to greater revenue. I don't think there's an iota of doubt, at least in my mind, on that. I mean, I still believe in that old adage, customer is king, right? And you've got to treat your customer like king. And if the customer experience, like I said earlier, you can truly live up to what they are looking for. And like Vinay just mentioned, the example of creating communities and leveraging that and showing off. I mean, one user group might have a need to show off what they've done, but that's a real need. And if you can actually deliver that, that's actually great customer experience. So the point is that for customer experience, if we can truly alienate what our own personal biases are and look at true customer experiences and build your user experience, that customer experience, I think it will definitely lead to revenues, not just in the longer run. I also believe in the shorter run, especially in the edtech, where a lot of admissions happen through referrals, where word of mouth is a pretty big mode of actually getting more and more customers and students. So definitely, completely on the same page, and could not agree more that it will lead to more revenues.
Thanks, Girish. Let me draw in Shantanu. Shantanu, one of the topic for today is cultivating, and we know that better CX means better revenue. It actually drives better behavior. But to cultivate that internally, and I want to look at outside in. We know customer experience is great, but to do it in the organization, being a leader in the organization, what are the key things that you do with employees? Because employees at the end of the day, happy employees are happy customers, right? So I just want to get your thoughts. What are the things that you drive with your team to drive a better CX? Shantanu, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So the way I'm seeing customer experience is not only to increase revenues at this point, Prasad, but I also think that it also helps build resilience amongst companies. It keeps you alive. It's almost like lifeline for you. Not only, obviously, I agree with what others said about revenue, but I think it's also important in today's times when in this entire startup world, you're aware of how a lot of great companies might be who come and go. I mean, and they're not because of lesser productivity, but because of resilience. And I think people have to figure out that bit of it. And this helps build resilience for the organization. But when you're asking your question, I think building customer experience is all about a culture. Right? So you have to you look at many things that you do. I mean, the question that you need to ask yourself is: do you actually have a customer experience strategy? Right? Can you nimbly respond to the market shifts and the emerging opportunities and the emerging competition that's happening? Because digitalization is changing everything that we have seen in our whole lifetime, right? This COVID-19 and digitalization has actually driven across the most transformative experiences for us, for all our life, for all our everything that we did has started becoming digital. So for our businesses, do you actually have a strategy to move that? Do you use the ops and the service features that actually support a very highly refined model for customer experience delivery? Do you have a culture of service execution down? Do you communicate your org strategic service mission? How do you leverage technology? I think there's so many components that needs to be looked at in case you have to drive customer experience as one of your key winning strategies. So I think all of these has to be looked at, and when we talk about all of these strategies, obviously our employees are the key ingredients to this recipe. So you have to make sure that all of these work together to create the right customer experience.
Thanks, Shantanu. Culture, well said. I think that's a very, very important aspect. Let me see if I can get based into this conversation on the similar lines. And I'm sure with this pandemic, the surge of customer interactions, employees probably remote, and you still need to drive a great CX, and employees are the ones who drives it. Are there anything that you could share which actually led to a better employee engagement, leading to better CX? Any insight that you could share, Base?
Talk about me?
Yep.
So we did many things. As soon as COVID struck.
Sorry, Shantanu, my mistake. I was I didn't see video. I was asking the question to Base.
Oh, okay, good.
Wait, okay, look, see, one of the bigger thing which I see in India, okay, I will tell you something counter then. I know a lot of experience. Yeah. You forget the unit economics and probably do too much of customer service. In the end, customer is gonna pay in India. Standards to value to expectations. Some people go overboard. Education, I can tell. Sure. Customer is not ready to pay a lot. You might have a mindset or a training customer experience in B2B, which might not transfer the reality of problem. That being said, I think sometimes I try because I definitely all the young employees reading about books and trying to in India try to go overboard of saying, look, an LMS cost like $50 a month a child maximum. And then the US cost lead it. I think the customer experience with the revenue expectation. So come from the customer. There's a world of difference in B2B space. On your customer side are all your old plus guys who have a very different young and they have different principles or they themselves. But in terms of engaging employees, one of the key things to do try to put almost on revenue. And you can't have a revenue if the customer keeps on canceling or you customer stop using your product. So economic way we try to do the employee leads to great customers.
Yeah. I think there's definitely some issue with your audio base. It's we could hear a few words and this disappears. But I think you one of the things that I've just maybe heard and probably trying to put the glue on around the pieces that I've heard and grasp is that when you provide and customer have multiple options, their expectations keep raising. So how do you really pair up? But I think I think that's a challenge that we have to solve, and actually we have to use a differentiator to retain customers and making customers loyal. I think one of the things that I've learned early days of my career and from one of the CX expert actually set the expectation with customer and deliver on those, and only set those expectations that you can deliver on. And if you could actually deliver on the expectation that you set, customer would be very happy because at least you're delivering the expectations. If you're getting delayed, tell them, be proactive to them.
Yeah. I was telling customer service which does not relate to revenue. So a lot of time when we focus on customer engagement, especially value conscious countries like India, trying as a CEO, right? Because of a generational difference between buyers and service providers. So all your people are all in 50, and all your guys are 50 plus. I have seen that in so many organizations. I see that in that's some challenge. I'm telling you, balance.
I wanted to add to what BS is saying here, Prasad. I agree to him to some extent when he talks about unit economics, but I'm not too sure whether customer in India, particularly, are we looking at cheap product? Are we willing to pay for value for the services that we are getting from the customer? I think over the longer period of time, customers are willing to pay a premium in case you actually provide them the experience and the value. And second thing is in India, the scale is something that's very, very unique about India, right? So, for example, Kanpur has more people than Switzerland, and the population of UP is more than the population of Brazil. The GDP of Maharashtra is more than the GDP of Pakistan. So, India scale, where we look at that type of a business, right? If you build the right type of a customer experience, I think there is a set of customers who are willing to pay for that, and there is a case to make a really scalable and large organization. I think as entrepreneurs and as startup entrepreneurs, I think we build two types of companies, right? One is a baby and a dwarf. And when they're small, they both look the same. They both eat the same quantity of food. The difference is in the genes and the DNA. I think customer experience and consumer experience defines the baby from a dwarf. The baby is going to grow. The dwarf is going to remain where it is. I think that makes the difference between a baby and a dwarf. One of the key things.
Pretty interesting views there, actually, Shantanu. Thank you and providing that insight. We got about a few more minutes left, and there are questions pouring from audience. So I'm going to read some questions for all of you, and then probably I'll figure out if I can point that question to each one of you. One of the first question is, what is personalizations will drive higher edtech adoption? I think it's what personalizations will drive higher edtech adoption. It equals personalization. Arpit, anything that you can talk about personalizing?
So, should you want me to take this up? So
Yeah,
I do it from to some extent, and then maybe others can add, because we all handle different types of learners. I handle largely higher education learners and more employed learners than traditional class school learners. So maybe each one of us have our experience. In my opinion, personalization is not about making things easy for the learner. It's about getting into the motivations, the interest, and the curiosity that arouses the curiosity of the learner and gets him involved into the learning process. I think personalization needs to be looked at from that perspective. And most platforms today, I've seen so many education platforms, including ours. I think we are using quite a cutting-edge technology in that space. All of us use a large amount of machine learning to figure out the motivations and the interests and the personalized experience of this learner, and create individualized, personalized learning paths for each one of them to be able to build those competencies and measure them. I think technologies today are available, and most edtech companies are using some part of this. I think both Girish, Vinay, and BS, I'm sure Arpit, they're all using this too in their experience in schools. I do it in their higher ed schools.
Let me add on to that. So yes, personalization. So at the kids level, so we target school kids, and one of the ways we are using personalization is basically identifying where the students require the most help. Like we give them assessments, regular assessments, and based on that, we are able to pinpoint like the learning objective where they actually need help. At like a very granular level, right? Basically, like whether they need help with, like, for example, quadratic equations or plane geometry, or like a particular concept that they were weak in probability. We can identify that at the learning objective level versus at a subject level, which is what the level of granularity typically you get from a school is. The school report only gives you marks for like math, science, biology, whatever. Whereas we can give that at a much more granular level, identify like which concepts they need help on, and ensure we are giving them that content and more assessments there, so that they can actually raise up their bar on the particular learning objective.
Perfect. Now, awesome. Arpit, would you want to add anything?
Sure. So talking about very specifically to the segment that we are in, I think speed and accuracy becomes a very, very key factor in helping students clear certain exams, right? And we, using ML and other algorithms, we can find out exactly where user have sort of wasted some extra seconds, and we are able to actually guide them that you should not have done this. This is a better way to probably solve this question, and so forth. So there's definitely a lot of personalization that is happening that can be further improved. I think one more important thing is sort of having right strategy, at least in the competitive exam world. You can actually spend a lot of time on one of the subjects which has a very less weightage in the exam. So you need a very, very right strategy there as well, not just how to solve an exam, but how you overall prepare for that exam. I think systems can do all of you have all the data with you, but I think there's another side of the entire story, which is your life, right? Which is sort of invisible to the digital world. And if you can view into that world and try to have more empathy with your end user, what they do in their life, from where they belong to, I think that is where you can have a very personalized strategy device for them. I think one thing that we recently experimented was our coach program, where we tried to have a one-on-one interaction with the students, try to understand their background, what kind of town they are from, what is their family background, how's the environment at the house. And even that has helped a lot of students where we are able to help them strategize within their own environment. So even if we can sort of mix both the worlds, both digital and offline, I think that's where the very, very solid product will come out.
Thanks, Harpreet. We got more questions pouring in, so let me see if I can get one more question answered. How can we build a reputation that pays off by emphasizing a strong commitment to strong commitment to customer experience? So the question is about how do you build build a reputation that demonstrates that you care for CX, that you care for your customers. Any takers? Girish, you want to take a stab at it?
So I think it's this is more a function of, I think, first setting the right expectation, like one of us mentioned earlier. I think if the expectation is set right from the beginning, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about delivering what you promise. And if what you're promising is correct, and delivering what you're promising, I think that's customer experience right there, which is served the way you want it served. And I think that is something which is the way I think we should really look at it. I'm not really sure what the question is really looking for, but I think from a customer experience standpoint, the way I look at it is if you deliver on what you're promising, what you're setting as an expectation, I think you have your customer experience deliver right there and then.
Yeah, I think, Girish, let me just give you a more view, because I think I'm trying to understand the question that came in from the audience. May I request rest of you to just go on mute? I think it'll also avoid noise coming through. Thank you, guys. Side effects of doing live webinars, guys. Thank you. So I think the question is around, we as a brand and all of us as a brand, we got to build a reputation. And when a customer sees that you care for CX, what are the things that they see? Oh, because you have chief grievance officer or a chief customer officer, that means you really care for them. How do you really build that brand for customers to believe that you care for CX? I think that's a question.
I think, look, a lot of things which you mentioned, right? If you have a chief customer care officer, if you have a toll-free number, WhatsApp messaging, chat service, if you have all of those support points available, I mean, that is nothing but a function of money, to be very honest, right? I think what where the branding will get developed due to customer experience, or where a customer will truly feel that you care for customer experience, is when that person's experience is actually completely seamless and that person actually receives whatever promised. So if I promise to the customer that your query or your question will be solved, let's say in a 10-minute chat, if it can actually be solved in a 10-minute turnaround time, then I know you care for customer experience. You might have 20 customer care officers and all kinds of stuff, but if you say 20 minutes and you take 40 minutes, you don't care for it, right? So at the end of the day, I think what they really experience or what they go through while using your product or service, and after, till as long as you have them, I think will truly define your branding in the long run, because that is where customer experience will really show up. Otherwise, it'll be very clear, well, you can have the whole battery of people and stuff, but customer experience is not really there. So I think it's just whether it's seamless and you're delivering on whatever you're promising. I think once they have that experience, I think your brand will get established pretty quick.
Prasad, actually, he rightly said this. I mean, the world has actually moved on. from measuring inputs to measuring outputs. Right. So
Yeah.
you have all of these teams. You have it. All of these are inputs. Who bothers about it? Who cares about it? Ultimately, people are bothered about output. And they're going to only measure red, amber, green only in the type of experience that they're getting. Right. So that's the only way to manage experience and reputation rates.
I think inputs, like Shantanu said, I think inputs is probably a first impression. But in this case, first impression is not actually the last impression. Because your first impression might be, oh, wow, these guys have everything. But when you try contacting them, you don't response, or you've been put on hold for 20 minutes. I mean, it's over. That's not customer experience, though you have everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. We got 4 more minutes, and I got one question. I'll take it from the audience. It's a longer question. It's around pre-COVID. It was easier to choose institutions like IITs or NIITs or IIMs and stuff like that. Now with COVID, a learner should choose an institution, as most of them are catching up with some tech interference and differentiates are blurring. I think the question is about with all of these, would students need to pick different educations, different things? Has anything changed? Because I think it's a very broad question. I think it's far more easier to go for a counseling in IITs and stuff like that, get some requisite help. With everything moving to digital, I think the students are finding difficult to find the requisite help. Anything that you guys think about? What key things that could help? Maybe is it a white space for somebody to build a system and maybe start a startup? Is it advice that you can throw?
Prasad, there are several platforms who are actually trying to help students choose our institution in case that's a question. There are several of these platforms, and I think they can help you compare institutions and all of these. But large part of this strategies were pre-COVID. People looked at physical infrastructure as one of the key ingredients or key recipes to attract students. Today, that's not relevant anymore. All the physical infrastructure that you built is not relevant. What did you build? The digital world is something which is becoming important. But look at the National New Education Policy. It talks about something which is very, very important. Students are no more, institutions of higher education can no more hold people hostage to themselves. I mean, just because I entered into a college or university by mistake, by something that I thought they're good enough. And once I enter, I figure out that they're not good enough. Am I stuck there for the next 4 years? Not. So that National New Education Policy talks about student mobility across multiple universities. I could do year one in a particular university, I'm not happy with it, carry the credits to another university and go directly to year two, and do that into year three into some university and go to the year fourth university and takes a degree. So the concept of students getting stuck hostage to a particular university just because I made a wrong choice in the initial stage, it's not valid anymore, right? So divorces are very easy going to be from the student world in case students are not happy with the experience that they're getting or the return of investment that they get for the money at the time that they go to the institution.
Yeah, brilliant.
So, Prasad?
Yeah, sorry, Girish, please.
Sorry. Yeah, so it's actually quite a coincidence that we had started this organization a year and a half back called Sahi Career, which we're actually revamping and relaunching after the first set of customer feedback that we got by the first week of October, which is around career counseling, which helps you not just select your right college for you, but also helps you understand your strengths and weakness. I think that entire journey is, I think, important, and it's not just about picking the right college. It's important to understand what is your strength and what is it that you're good at. In India, typically we always go by what our friends are doing, what our family has done, what our cousins are doing. I mean, it happened to me. It happened to me. So I'm pretty sure it must be happening with a lot of people. You just tend to follow that. Right? So I think it's important that there are scientific tools which one uses to arrive at what your strengths are, what you are interested in, and what you're good at, which are two different things. And once you arrive at that, then to choose the right career path for you, which could be a career in an organization or through an academic institute. That could vary. But I think it's important to derive that from this understanding of your own strengths. I think that can be really delivered through a platform which we're actually trying to build now through sahicareer.com. Yeah.
Thank you, Girish. I know we are by top of the hour. I see Srishti also joining. I just want to summarize what we have gone through. I think it's a very intense conversations and multiple views. If you have to develop really great customer CX and cultivate that, you got to start doing it inside. So engage employees, empower them with the right tools and technology to serve your customers and communities. I think driving a great CX means also having a great user community. So the peers will get help from each other rather than getting from organization. Very clear thing. Also keep looking at where the customers are moving and the choices of engagements are changing. From telephones, WhatsApp to maybe in the future there's something else could come in like Telegram. Arpit talked about it. I think looking at all of these aspects, I'm sure all tech companies and beyond can really drive a great CX. With that, I just want to say thank you all the panelists for a really engaging conversation. Shantanu, Vinay, Arpit, Girish, and Bes, really appreciate it. And for a great evening and a great conversation. Over to you, Srishti.
Thank you to all of you. It was really a wonderful conversation. And thank you to Mr. Prasad especially. He has very well moderated the session and kept it very insightful.